in Los Angeles, Fort Hunter Liggett is identified as a remote and isolated installation, a minimum of 45 minutes from the nearest town center, hospital, drugstore, or even a Taco Bell. So being remote and isolated, Fort Hunter Liggett sits at the end of the utility electrical distribution feed. And due to power assurance concerns in the mid-2000s, Fort Hunter Liggett began embarking on a plan to compensate for those power concerns by implementation of a microgrid to support the cantonment area and its facilities. When making the decision to move in this direction, it was also decided that since Fort Hunter Liggett's California climate is basically 350 days of sun a year, with a few rainy days thrown in the winter, a renewables-based system, considering photovoltaic generation and battery energy storage as the foundation of the microgrid's energy resources, would be a good match. To support this microgrid over the last 15 years or so, FHL has implemented over $100 million in infrastructure projects, from distribution system upgrades, geothermal HVAC retrofits, centralized building control systems, and of course, solar production and battery energy storage. As a result of this forward-leaning posture, Fort Hunter Liggett was identified by the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment as a net zero pilot installation for energy and waste in 2011. In that time, FHL has eliminated the use of fossil fuel as a heating source, reduced propane consumption by over 80%, while transitioning those systems to electrical-based equipment. And during that process, Fort Hunter Liggett achieved the largest reduction in energy use intensity of any installation in the Army from FY15 to FY20. Fort Hunter Liggett is, look at that, Fort Hunter Liggett. Okay, what happens? So, Fort Hunter Liggett is also slated to achieve electric net zero, as well as critical mission resilience over the next 14 months. While implementing these resilience efforts at Fort Hunter Liggett, it was also decided that it would make good sense to implement the same systems at PRIFTA, Parks Reserve Forces Training Area, to improve their resilience posture as well, and similar infrastructure upgrades and facility enhancements and renewable systems have been implemented concurrently at Camp Parks. And since any plan like this needs good collaboration with experienced partners to succeed, Fort Hunter Liggett reached out to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to help support the PRIFTA efforts in designing and implementation of the microgrid. And with that, Dr. Doug Black from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab is here to discuss a little bit about our microgrid and the control systems his group is developing for it.
Thanks, Jared. I'm Doug Black. I lead the Grid Integration Group at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And obviously the project that Jared just talked about with the microgrid at Camp Parks is funded by the California Energy Commission, and I'm the principal investigator for that, that research project and demonstration of that microgrid. So Jared mentioned his need, or the need of FHL and PRIFTA for microgrids with local power generation, because of the risk of electrical grid outages. And these outages are often caused by extreme weather events. And in our case in California, that's often wildfires. In other places, it's hurricanes, floods. And we're seeing more frequent and more intense extreme weather events because of climate change. Part of the good news here, though, is that the renewable distributed energy resources, or DERs, are such as solar and wind power, when paired with batteries or other storage, can both slow climate change and provide emergency backup power in the event of these climate change-caused grid outages. Now, currently, that emergency backup power, especially military bases, is most often provided by fossil fuel powered generators that are really only used in emergencies. They sit idle nearly all of the time and are only run in rare cases of emergency. Renewable-based DERs and microgrids can be used continuously to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions from electricity generation, and also be available to power local loads in the event of a grid outage, so provide that emergency backup power. Now, these the coordinated operation and control of DERs and microgrids is needed so that the overall grid functions within the narrow frequency and voltage bands that it does by precisely balancing supply with demand. This coordinated operation and control requires a connection through some form of communication from the local site to the distribution operator to the transmission operator, with distribution operators usually being what you'd think of as utilities, and transmission operators being these larger regional managers of getting transmission from where it's generated to the distribution points. We need this coordination so that the overall system generation forecasting and operation can be done in a cost-effective and just reliable and resilient way. So one example of this at LBL is we're involved in a multi-lab effort called Fast DERMS, which will enable the scalable aggregation and near real-time management of both utility scale and small scale DERs through reliability-constrained economic dispatch, which is basically just putting a monetary value on the grid service that each DER or aggregation of DERs is providing. So in the cybersecurity sense, LBNL, we're primarily focused on the control side. We don't do the preventing the intrusion. One area of cybersecurity we look at, though, is what we call cyber physical security, that will take unhacked devices, specifically like solar inverters or battery inverters, to mitigate the impact of devices that have been hacked. So let's say if a cyber attack is undetected and successful in changing the operating set points or even shutting down one or more PV panels, battery storage devices, the unhacked components can be used to stabilize that local electric grid by adjusting their parameters to balance the frequency or the voltage. This can be done autonomously by other working components, by even possibly the attacked component. Some examples of LBNL work in this area are projects with the acronyms SIGAR and SPADES, just as they're spelled. If you search for those, you'll find information about. So in our military microgrid projects, at camp parks in particular, our method of cybersecurity is basically to just not connect to the internet at all and use a self-contained controls communication network islanded within the fence line of the base. Now, we're trying to push our bounds a little bit and take the baby step of connecting to the outside world to acquire weather forecast data that is critical to our control system in forecasting how much solar power will generate in the next day or days ahead, so that we can allocate and schedule our resources accordingly. And this is where we've come to work with DDS and Nick here to do this in a cyber-secured way that meets DoD's stringent standards.
Very stringent. Hi everybody. I am Nick Ashworth. I'm representing DDS, or Defense Digital Service. We are a cybersecurity / hacking group that works out of the Pentagon underneath SecDef and OSD. We basically came into this project and have been helping out where we have a couple climate initiatives to try to help out on increasing the performance and the cybersecurity resiliency of a lot of the DoD's methods. Army had come out with a standard that said, or with a mandate that said they were going to move all their installations over to having microgrids, which is great from an energy resilience standpoint. You're no longer at the mercy of things going bad whenever the power goes out. It also reduces the likelihood of someone being encouraged to attack the main power grid. And it also is going to be a huge help on the climate side because by having microgrids, a lot of our carbon-free energy initiatives and stuff like that can take off the ground. The problem that we found was microgrids are very complicated. And so whenever we reached out and we're like, okay, who has a microgrid so that we can actually look at and do analysis of, that led us back to Fort Hunter Liggett, who everyone in the Pentagon that we talked to was very adamant was the tip of the spear point. When Jared was nice enough to invite us in to do a tour of facilities and run around, one of the key things that we quickly picked up on was, while the DoD is very good at physical state security and is very good at trying to mandate, okay, I'm going to use gates and guards and guns to stop someone from gaining access to a system. I'm going to use a bunch of passwords and try to use isolated networks so that my management system is down. Microgrids are inherently fairly complicated, especially whenever you're using a renewable system, because the sun doesn't stay in the same part of the sky every day. There's a lot of calculations and weather data that handles that you need to process to predict, okay, how much energy production am I going to produce at a given time scale? What we noticed in Camp Parks and where we've been working helping out with is, while the Army Corps of Engineering is very good at building a lot of things, their specializations basically just to build things, not necessarily to do cybersecurity practices. At the same time, NIST and your cyber risk assessments and stuff like that are all built around kind of enterprise-based systems, not an ICS system. And so you can do an ATO, but that ATO doesn't really translate very well whenever I'm talking about a microgrid or when I'm talking about like a converter box or something like that. They're really only meant for like, this is my email database. And so we've been helping these guys to kind of go through and be like, okay, what should these cybersecurity standards for these kind of installations look like? What can actually be done by these services while still encouraging the rapid rollout of these systems? Because let's face it, this is our planet. We only have one of them. We desperately want, both big DoD and the community at large to accept these technologies and stuff like that. But we don't want to have people sticking their head in the sand of thinking, oh, well, because my password is 24 characters on my management system, I'm safe. That is not the case. And so one of the efforts that we're kind of doing as a partnership at this year's DEF CON is we're actually going to be having a hacking challenge where you will be able to attack a representation of the weather data system that these microgrids use to actually process and do that calculation of, okay, how much energy do I push into battery power? How much energy do I sell to the utility to recuperate costs? You'll be able to target those systems, and the same way of every other AI, no matter how simple or complex, if you get bad data in, you get bad data out. And we have a demo running on today that kind of shows what sort of fun shenanigans can happen when you get bad data in. So for those of you who are interested in that, feel free to join us in DEF CON and try your hand at attacking the real thing. So.
Question.
Go ahead.
So first of all, you're speaking my language. So just give by way of background, I'm a former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy Installation Environment. So I was charged by Secretary Mattis with coming up with an OT security regime, and I failed miserably starting in 2017. So what David and I are working on right now, and you're going to want to get to know Dave really, is we're actually trying to come at the UFC from another direction. So we're looking at the UFC, and we're looking at the UFC, and we're looking at the UFC.
You got to emphasize that point.
Yeah. All righty then.
And we all love audio.
So we are embarked working UFC from another direction. It's outdated. Trying to use 805.3 or 818, depending which one you look at. Trying to apply the risk management framework for the engineers of the world. I'm a former military engineer, and for the designers of the world, it's difficult to take that UFC and actually put practical cybersecurity into military facilities. Yes. All right, and that's kind of where I was coming at it. What can we use? All right. So what we really do need, we don't need a static UFC level. We need something more above and beyond. So that's what David and I are working on right now with an industry group. Bringing into the federal engineering space what should be those additional cybersecurity steps, mainly from an OT, and it's a performance standard. As you know, designing cybersecurity into facilities is different from performing over time. So the question is do you guys want to work with us? Do you all want to see what we're working on and get involved? Because I think we're approaching the same issue from two different directions. And we are also working with NSA, Michael Drainsfield, and Necton and the team there. And we're bringing a 706-2, which, as you might know, is a NSA initiated cybersecurity standard for OT. We're looking at as part of what we're bringing in as a framework. Now, I will say the organization that I'm started was since I left DoD. as a nonprofit that's facing all of society. We're taking 62443 and then wrapping a performance framework around it and offering it to the entire built environment. So I'm not just looking at DoD, but what I believe is I can take lessons I learned from Cybercom and NSA about how it's not working within DoD, because no matter what we do for OT security, no one's going to pay for it.
Yep.
Because of the fact there's no incentive. So the goal is, how do you create that incentive on the outside, and then from that credible framework, bring it back into government as an executive order. So what we've created these levels: cyber bronze, cyber silver, cyber gold, that addresses the RMF, and then also allows different levels based on your mission criticality. I think that's probably having spent a lot of time with DDS, seeing what you guys are trying to do. I appreciate that, but ultimately you're going to run into the same problem I have. No one's going to spend money on whatever you come up with.
That is a common challenge in this space.
We have 10 minutes left.
So anyway, I just want to make sure that you know that what we're working on.
So we'll go ahead and finish our talk, and then we'll have to turn over the room to the next folks.
I think we're good. Is there any other questions online?
Yeah, how are questions, right?
I don't think the room is set up to accept questions.
That's kind of what I was hoping.
Yes, my apologies. So we're more than happy. I guess just as like kind of general background, I'm a little bit weird from a hacking space. My specialty is RF exploitation. So I got my start in the Navy hacking airplanes, and now I've wound up here. It's a weird world.
But that actually ties in with Fort Hunter Liggett.
Yeah,
so one of the things that you're talking about is, every installation and every microgrid now has its own unique snowflake. Everything has different parameters. Yep. So I know you're talking about not everything being static. The microgrid that we're implementing at Camp Parks is going to be based on fiber optics and communication within the fence line. But at Fort Hunter Liggett, the communication protocol is going to be wireless. Mm-hmm. So it's a different challenge, and that's why this partnership has worked out well, hopefully for us, because we'd like to have them come in and do the hacking challenge while we're in the process of commissioning the microgrid, so that we can get those lessons learned from the hacking competition and implement that in the course of commissioning, as opposed to trying to figure it all out later, what we did wrong.
Even at Camp Parks and in future sites, we prefer not to be constrained with that, having to just be on site and have those outside connections, because there's so many benefits to them. So, so developing this is
that's one of your big challenges right now, right? Under DODI 8510 and then UFC, we're not allowed remote access.
Right. Yes.
So when you look at that, and it's been something we've been talking about a long time, is we want the base of the future. We need the microgrids. We need that complexity. So we got to kind of start getting away from bare minimum controls, least function, least privilege, and put a structure in place that allows us to now head towards those technologies. So we were struggling with what was soft, squishy, prescriptive to even get that to fit the old model. And now as we do this with what you guys are doing and some of the work that's going on at Tyndall and some of the new directives like Air Force, no wireless, we're really trying to have to find this new balance now, because it would be great to take what you have there, let Hunter Liggett and roll it, try service, but no wireless is really constraining.
Well, and this goes back, one of the core problems of the ATO process, like one of the fundamental issues of it, regardless of whether you're talking enterprise system or not, is it's an inherently punitive system. Mm-hmm. The DoD as a whole has a very big problem on technology in general, whether it be internet connected, whether it be anything, of where we just don't use it. The easy answer is to say no, so we say no. We keep saying no for a decade, and then we wonder why we're 2 decades behind on technology.
Absolutely correct.
We as a government, like, you still have, the Supreme Court still uses pages. You have people physically running around carrying sticky notes to each other. We are very, very bad at adapting, and one of the reasons of that is we kind of reward this just say no. And the ATO process is a perfect example of that, where, don't do wireless at all. Wireless isn't worth it. Well, that's not true at all. Like, Amazon is a giant company. They do wireless everywhere. They manage to own everything. They figured it out. Google has figured it out. Now, are either these systems perfect? No. Are these companies? No. But like, you can do that. And so what we at DDS are trying to do very much is like get to a more encouraging system where I'm not telling you don't use a technology. I'm not saying no, don't do it all. I'm saying here are the vulnerabilities. Make sure you address them. rather than just saying, carte blanche, this is not for you, this is never for you. We've always paid Bob to run around and read the meters. We're going to keep paying Bob to run around and read the meters. Doesn't matter that Bob really wants to do anything other than run around base and read meters. This is Bob's task. We really want to get away from that and broaden it out so that we can take in this new technology. Because the harsh reality right now is 9 times out of 10, the commercial sector does it better because they're willing to take the risk and integrate it, and because they're willing to actually reach out to security professionals and say, hey, here's this new shiny thing. What do I do to make it safe? And so we at DDS, we have a program called Hack the Pentagon, which is where we do a lot of outreach with the open sector security research community on doing that. And one of the key parts of that is being able to bring in a mass of public sector researchers who specialize in a given task and be able to say, okay, how do I make this thing safe? Don't do a yes or no of you must do this. It must be this box. It can only be this box. The box must be colored blue, only blue. Cyan is not acceptable. Green is not acceptable. Instead to be like, okay, here's a more adaptive framework. Here's a more adaptive analysis of the system that you actually have installed as is. Here's what we want you to do. Here's what you shouldn't do. Here's what you should be aware of. And so getting big DoD to move into that structure is going to be key as we start talking about both microgrids and different energy generations for those, because, again, on that, we don't want to lock in to say, like, you can only use photovoltaics and you can only use this specific solar panel type of photovoltaics, because that panel company will eventually go to business. Those systems, new technology will arise. Maybe it'll be like an algae farm thing. Maybe it'll be like a mini nuclear power plant, and we'll go full Jetsons level or whatever that old cartoon was. We don't want to restrict ourselves. Oh, sorry.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
So what's the next step for y'all? I mean, you DDS did some amazing work. I mean, as far as pointing out where we have vulnerabilities and being able to suggest how can we get the big Pentagon to start paying attention to it?
The next step right now is just to kind of show that we can make these systems secure, which is why Camp Parks and the Fort Hunter Liggett projects are so important, because if we can prove it there and prove that this works and get a, document of like, okay, here is how these things work. We've had cybersecurity professionals come in, they've tried to attack the system, they've given it its bruises, and here's their report. Here's LBNO's report of how to do securely and at scale. Here's the analysis from Fort Hunter Liggett from a DoD perspective as an owner of this is what we like, don't like. That's how we can then get the buy-in from the rest of the DoD to do it.
From your experience in your old role, what do you think?
I had a hard time. So look, I had the Secretary of Defense sign out a memo on, okay, here's when you do the first inventory to mitigate OT threat. It just dropped on the service like every other 100 memos, where it's an unfunded mandate. And I could not get them to put the money against it. And that's kind of why we're coming in from a completely different direction now to try to influence a return on investment and or mission assurance, from a mission assurance perspective. Are you working with DITRA? DITRA is doing DCAs and TCA reviews, and they're bringing in cyber red team. Are you all working with DITRA on that?
We worked with them on a couple of projects, but
because I would think that'd be another avenue there. Particularly, once you show the value of what you can do, and within the DITRA red teams. Right now, they're outsourcing their red teaming to a couple companies, but I would think you guys would want to eventually marry up with DITRA, because that's really what's getting the SecDef's attention is DCA and TCA vulnerabilities.
Okay, any closing remarks from Fort Hunter Liggett, from LVNL, from DDS?
I'd just like to say, from everything that DDS is doing is great. Lawrence Berkeley has been a great partner that we've been with for the last, I don't know how many years we've been working with you guys on this. But from the field level, we have our own unique challenges. Just the idea of, from a simple perspective, Tesla batteries don't work unless they're connected to Tesla, but we're not allowed to connect a Tesla battery to Tesla, which means that we're already defeating our warranty and our operational maintenance. So at my level, how do I try to go up the chain? This is my way of trying to embark on some kind of a plan to improve those things so that our projects that we're working on now can succeed without the failures that we've seen in the past with implementing new technologies.
Yeah, I just want to say this may be one of the smallest conference presentations I've made, but some of the best questions and discussion ahead at the end. Thanks very much.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.